The new Sword Art Online movie Unanswered Butterfly is so bad that it accomplished something I honestly thought was impossible. It brought Mother's Basement out of Sword Art Online hating retirement. For years, Mother's Basement was one of the biggest names when it came to anime criticism, especially when it came to ripping apart Sword Art Online. But after covering the series for years, he eventually moved on. The jokes had been made, the criticisms had been repeated, and it seemed like there was nothing left to say. The Sword Art Online hate train had finally pulled into the station and everyone assumed it was done. Then Unanswered Butterfly showed up. Somehow, this movie was such a spectacular mess that it managed to restart the entire conversation. It was bad enough, frustrating enough, and confusing enough to make an old critic look at Sword Art Online again and think, wait, I actually have more to say about this. And honestly, that might be the funniest part. It takes a special kind of disaster to bring someone back to a franchise they already spent years criticizing. Mother's Basement wasn't sitting around waiting for another opportunity to hate on Sword Art Online. He had already said his piece and moved on. But Unanswered Butterfly came along and basically dragged him back into the battlefield. The Sword Art Online hate machine that had been collecting dust suddenly turned back on. The engine started, the lights came back, and the internet was once again reminded why this franchise became such a massive target in the first place. Mother's Basement was supposed to be finished with Sword Art Online. The chapter was closed. The book was shut. The conversation was over. Except apparently Sword Art Online wasn't finished creating new problems. Unanswered Butterfly managed to do what many thought couldn't happen. It revived a criticism cycle that had been quiet for years. Instead of being the movie that proved the franchise had moved past its old issues, it became the movie that reminded everyone those issues were still there. It wasn't just another mediocre release that came and went. It was bad enough to make people who had already moved on turn around and say, hold on, we need to talk about this. It truly is a Return of the King moment for Mother's Basement. Forget waiting 20 years for Odysseus to finally return to Ithaca. I've been waiting for something far more important, the return of Mother's Basement to the Sword Art Online battlefield. For years, it looked like the Sword Art Online hate videos had stopped, and it seemed like the legendary Sword Art Online hate era for Mother's Basement had finally come to an end. But then this movie came along and proved that the fire was still burning. The king has returned. The Sword Art Online critic who spent years fighting the franchise has picked up the sword again. I've been waiting for this moment. And now, after all this time, Mother's Basement has returned to remind everyone that the Sword Art Online hate train never truly disappeared. Some heroes return because the world needs saving. Mother's Basement returned because Sword Art Online released another disaster.
And honestly, Mother's Basement was 100% justified for coming back. This movie is not just a minor stumble or a disappointing addition to the franchise. It is a complete disaster. Unanswered Butterfly feels like everything people have criticized about Sword Art Online over the years was thrown into a blender and somehow made even worse. The writing is frustrating, the characters are unbearable, and the story makes decisions that leave you wondering how anyone thought this was a good idea. There's almost nothing here that works. The movie fails as a story, fails as a character-driven experience, and fails to give fans anything meaningful beyond another reason to argue about how low this franchise can go. This isn't the kind of bad where you can at least laugh at the ridiculous moments or find some hidden charm. It's the kind of bad that actively tests your patience. Every questionable decision piles on top of the last one until you start wondering if the movie is intentionally trying to see how much the audience can tolerate. This is Sword Art Online at its absolute worst. The bottom of the barrel. The kind of movie that makes you look back at the franchise's previous mistakes and think, maybe things weren't as bad as I thought. And the sad part? Mother's Basement apparently had to pay $110 just to watch this movie. Think about that for a second. Someone had to spend over $100 of their own money to experience what was supposed to be the latest big Sword Art Online release, only to discover that it was somehow even worse than expected. It's honestly hilarious that a movie this disappointing had the confidence to come with that kind of price tag. The people behind it looked at this film and apparently thought, yes, this is worth premium movie pricing. Meanwhile, the audience is sitting there wondering if they accidentally paid extra for the privilege of being frustrated. Imagine spending $110 just to get the inspiration for another Sword Art Online. Roast video. At that point, the movie isn't just bad. It's actively creating content for the people criticizing it. And somehow, I have an even bigger complaint. I watched this movie for free, and I still feel like I got ripped off. That is how bad Unanswered Butterfly is. Usually, when you watch something without spending any money, you can at least say, well, at least I didn't waste my wallet. But this movie somehow managed to waste something even more valuable, my time. I didn't have to pay $110. I didn't have to buy a ticket. I didn't have to spend a single cent. And yet, by the time the credits rolled, I still felt like I had made a terrible investment. That's honestly an impressive achievement. Most bad movies just make you regret spending money on them. Unanswered Butterfly goes one step further and makes you regret giving it your attention at all. The fact that someone could pay over $100 to watch this while I watched it for free and still feel like I was the one who got scammed says everything about how disappointing this movie is. Even if I was a billionaire, I still wouldn't spend $110 on this garbage movie. And that's the funniest part. $110 would mean absolutely nothing to me at that point. I could probably spend more than that without even noticing. But even with unlimited money, I would still look at Unanswered Butterfly and think, no thanks. I'd rather keep my money. That is how little I think this movie is worth. The fact that anyone thought this movie was worth charging $110 for is honestly one of the most ridiculous things about it. This isn't some once-in-a-lifetime cinematic experience. This isn't a masterpiece that changes the way you look at storytelling. This is a Sword Art Online movie that somehow manages to make people question why they spent their valuable time watching it. And that's before even talking about the actual quality. A movie has to earn your time. It has to give you something in return for the hours you spend watching it. Maybe it's an incredible story, memorable characters, amazing animation, or an emotional experience that sticks with you afterward. Unanswered Butterfly gives you none of that. Instead, it feels like paying a premium price to sit through a collection of bad writing choices, annoying characters, and moments that make you wonder how anyone looked at the finished product and thought, yep, this is ready. The funniest thing is that I didn't even pay for it, and I still felt like I got ripped off. So the idea of someone spending $110 on this is honestly unbelievable. Imagine paying over $100 just to walk away thinking, that was a mistake. Even if I had billionaire money, I would rather spend that $110 on literally anything else. A better anime movie, a better game, a better meal. Maybe even just throwing the money into a fire would at least be more entertaining. At least the fire would do something interesting. And the thing is, Mother's Basement's criticisms of this movie actually make complete sense. Watching his video, I found myself agreeing with basically everything he pointed out because the problems with Unanswered Butterfly are impossible to ignore. The issues aren't just small nitpicks or complaints that require you to overanalyze every little detail. They are fundamental problems with the movie itself. The writing choices, the character decisions, the pacing, and the way the story handles its own ideas all create a frustrating experience. What makes it worse is that a lot of these problems are things the movie could have easily avoided. It's not like the criticism comes from someone who went into it expecting perfection. The movie simply keeps making choices that leave you questioning what the writers were thinking. Mother's Basement basically said everything that needed to be said. Every major criticism he brought up lines up with the problems I had while watching the movie myself. It feels less like he was reaching for reasons to dislike it, and more like he was just pointing out the obvious issues that were already sitting right there on screen. For once, the return of the Sword Art Online hate wasn't just nostalgia or old grudges coming back. The movie genuinely gave people plenty of new reasons to criticize it. For years, Kirito has reigned as the undisputed king of terrible anime protagonists. Whenever people talked about overpowered wish fulfillment characters, his name was always at the top of the list. He wasn't just criticized, he became the benchmark for badly written anime leads. But after all these years, he's finally been dethroned. Because the new Sword Art Online movie somehow introduced a character who's even worse. Meet Emirun, a character so unbelievably insufferable, so painfully contrived, and so spectacularly badly written that she actually makes Kirito look like a well-balanced protagonist by comparison. And that's saying something. If Kirito spent years setting the gold standard for everything people dislike about Sword Art Online, Emirun somehow managed to raise the bar. So today, we're going to break down exactly why Emirun isn't just a bad character, but why she's the worst character Sword Art Online has ever created. Well, the worst character Sword Art Online has ever created so far, I should say. Because if there's one thing this franchise has proven over the years, it's that there's always room to sink even lower. Every time you think it's hit rock bottom, someone at the writing table apparently grabs a shovel and starts digging. So who knows? Maybe a future movie or season will introduce someone even worse. At this point, I wouldn't bet against it. For starters, Emirun is just unbelievably annoying. I honestly don't know how anyone in this movie can stand being around her for more than 5 seconds. Every time she opens her mouth, it's like the writers challenge themselves to make her as grating as humanly possible. Instead of being quirky or endearing, she comes across as loud, obnoxious, and exhausting. The kind of character who dominates every scene she's in for all the wrong reasons. And the worst part is that the movie seems completely oblivious to it. It genuinely expects you to find her charming and lovable, when all I could think was, can someone please tell her to stop talking? By the end of the movie, I wasn't rooting for her. I was just rooting for fewer scenes with her in them. And the voice performance doesn't do her any favors either. Every line is delivered at what feels like maximum volume. Instead of sounding energetic or expressive, she just comes across as shrill. It's the kind of voice that starts wearing on you almost immediately, and because Emirun talks constantly, you never really get a break from it. Whether she's excited, panicking, or just having a normal conversation, it all seems to be dialed up to 11. After a while, it stops feeling like a character talking and starts feeling like someone yelling directly into your ears for 2 hours. Rather than making Emirun more lovable or quirky, the performance amplifies all of her most irritating traits and makes an already grating character even harder to sit through. This character just does not know when to stop talking. Emirun is constantly going, constantly reacting, constantly making sure that the audience remembers she's there. Every scene feels like it has to revolve around her saying something, doing something, or making some exaggerated expression. And the funny thing is, even Kirito wasn't this exhausting. For all the criticism Kirito gets, at least he had the decency to spend half his screen time silently brooding in a corner. He was the type of character who would stare dramatically into the distance while thinking about his tragic backstory for the 100th time. Edgy? Sure, but at least he gave the audience a few moments of peace. Emirun, on the other hand, feels like she has an unlimited dialogue meter that never runs out. There is no quiet moment, no chance for a scene to breathe, and no escape from her constant energy. It's like the movie looked at Kirito's quiet, edgy personality and thought, what if we made the complete opposite? Unfortunately, they didn't create a fun, energetic character. They created someone who feels like having conversation with a person who just drank 3 energy drinks and refuses to take a hint that everyone around them wants 5 minutes of silence. Emirun is easily one of the worst characters Sword Art Online has ever introduced. In fact, I would go as far as saying she might be the most frustrating character in the entire franchise. What makes her so unbearable is that the movie seems completely convinced that she is a lovable, entertaining character, but the actual experience of watching her is the complete opposite. Instead of adding something meaningful to the story, she constantly distracts from it. Every scene she appears in becomes harder to sit through because her personality is just so overwhelming and irritating. The worst part is that she doesn't feel like a character who was written to challenge the audience or create an interesting conflict. She feels like she was designed to be quirky and memorable, but all those exaggerated traits end up making her exhausting. The movie keeps pushing her personality so hard that any charm she might have had gets buried underneath the constant noise. After watching Unanswered Butterfly, I honestly have no desire to see Emirun return. Some characters leave you wanting to know more about them. Some characters make you excited to see what happens next. Emirun does the exact opposite. Her return would not make me curious or interested. It would just make me wonder how much more screen time I have to endure. Hopefully, this is the last time we see her in Sword Art Online. Emirun is one character I would be perfectly happy leaving behind. It's honestly hilarious how Sword Art Online fans will insist that the series has this amazing reputation now, and that all the hate has magically disappeared. According to them, the old criticism is gone, everyone has moved on, and the days of Sword Art Online being one of the internet's favorite punching bags are supposedly ancient history. And yet, The moment a new movie comes out and gives people a reason to talk about the series again, the old debates immediately come crawling back out of the grave. It's almost like the hate never actually disappeared. It was just waiting for another excuse to return. Sword Art Online fans love to say that the franchise has been redeemed and that the criticism is just outdated internet bandwagoning. But then a new entry releases, and suddenly people are once again talking about bad writing, frustrating characters, and questionable story decisions. If the series really had escaped all criticism, then why did one new movie manage to bring back years-old complaints almost instantly? Why did it inspire another round of videos, discussions, and people explaining exactly what they dislike about Sword Art Online? Maybe the hate didn't vanish. Maybe people just stopped talking about it because they were tired of repeating the same points. Then Unanswered Butterfly showed up and basically said, "Don't worry guys, I have new material." Mother's Basement's video is proof that the hate surrounding Sword Art Online is still alive and well. It didn't disappear. It didn't magically vanish like some fans claim. It was just quieter because people had already made their arguments and moved on. But the moment something new gave people a reason to criticize the series again, all of those old discussions came right back. The idea that nobody hates Sword Art Online anymore has always been a little strange because the criticism was never actually gone. People weren't constantly making videos about it because at a certain point there wasn't much new to say. The same problems have been discussed over and over again. Then Unanswered Butterfly released and basically handed everyone fresh material. Mother's Basement coming back to make another Sword Art Online criticism video shows that the franchise can still inspire the same reactions it always has. The audience that disliked the series didn't suddenly change their minds. They didn't forget the issues they had with it. They were just waiting for something new to remind them why they disliked it in the first place. Sword Art Online fans can say the hate is dead all they want. But the moment a new movie is bad enough to bring back one of the biggest Sword Art Online critics on YouTube, it becomes pretty clear that the controversy never really went away. Some Sword Art Online fans are honestly living in a completely different reality. They keep insisting that the franchise has somehow escaped all criticism, that the hate is ancient history, and that everyone has moved on. But that's not what actually happened. The criticism didn't disappear. People just stopped talking about it as much because, after years of debates, there wasn't much new to discuss. The same problems had already been pointed out countless times. The conversation went quiet, and some fans seemed to mistake that silence for the entire internet suddenly changing its mind. Then Unanswered Butterfly released, and suddenly all those criticisms came right back. Mother's Basement's video is proof that the dislike for Sword Art Online never truly vanished. The audience that criticized the series didn't magically disappear. They were still there, they just weren't constantly making videos about a franchise that had already been dissected 1,000 times. Some fans need to stop confusing "people aren't talking about it right now" with "everyone agrees it's good now." Those are two completely different things. Sword Art Online can have a dedicated fan base and still be heavily criticized. Both things can exist at the same time. But pretending the controversy is gone doesn't make it true, especially when one new movie is enough to bring the entire conversation right back. Clearly, there's still a lot of Sword Art Online hate out there. The idea that the criticism has completely disappeared is just not true. If anything, Unanswered Butterfly proved that the moment Sword Art Online gives people a reason to start talking about its flaws again, there are still plenty of people ready to criticize it. For years, some fans have argued that the hate surrounding the series is outdated, that everyone has moved on, and that Sword Art Online is now widely accepted. But the reality is much more complicated. The criticism never actually vanished. People just stopped constantly talking about it because the same arguments had already been made over and over again. Then this movie came out and reopened the entire conversation. The fact that a major anime critic like Mother's Basement returned to make another video about Sword Art Online shows that the frustration surrounding this franchise is still very much alive. The audience that disliked Sword Art Online didn't suddenly disappear. They were still there, they just needed a new reason to speak up. And Unanswered Butterfly gave them plenty of reasons. Whether it's the writing, the characters, or the questionable decisions the movie makes, there are still a lot of people who have serious problems with Sword Art Online. The hate didn't die. It was just waiting for the next opportunity to come back. So when fans claim that nobody hates Sword Art Online anymore, this movie basically proves the opposite. The criticism is still there, the discussions are still happening, and the franchise can still inspire the exact same reactions it has been getting for years. There is one thing I have to disagree with in Mother's Basement's video, though. While I agree with many of his criticisms of Unanswered Butterfly, I think he gives Sword Art Online far more credit than it deserves when it comes to the progressive movies. He argues that the progressive movies are genuinely great and that they are worth watching, but I just don't see it. In my opinion, the progressive movies are still not very good. Yes, they might be an improvement over some of the absolute worst parts of the original Sword Art Online, but that is an incredibly low standard. Making something slightly less bad does not automatically make it good. The biggest problem with progressive is that it feels less like a meaningful improvement and more like the franchise trying to rewrite its own mistakes after the damage was already done. Instead of telling a compelling new story, it feels like Sword Art Online going back, looking at its own problems and attempting to put a bandage over them years later. The movies do have some improvements. Asuna gets more focus, the Aincrad arc gets expanded, and the pacing is better compared to the original series. But those changes alone don't suddenly fix the bigger issues. A story with better animation and more scenes for certain characters is still a flawed story if the writing and character development don't hold up. At the end of the day, I still don't find the progressive movies particularly interesting or engaging. They feel like the same Sword Art Online problems repackaged with a bigger budget and a fresh coat of paint. The franchise is essentially saying, look, we fixed it, while still carrying many of the same issues that caused people to criticize it in the first place. So while I understand why some fans view progressive as a step forward, I personally don't think it redeems Sword Art Online. To me, it's still the same series with many of the same weaknesses, just with better visuals and a slightly improved presentation. Personally, I would not recommend watching the progressive movies. I don't think they're worth your time, especially when there are so many other anime movies out there that do a much better job with their characters, storytelling, and world building. At best, the progressive movies are a slightly improved version of Sword Art Online's earlier problems. They fix a few surface-level issues, but they don't completely solve the deeper problems that have always held the series back. A little more focus on Asuna and a longer look at Aincrad are nice additions, but they aren't enough to turn the movies into something truly memorable. The biggest problem is that there are countless other anime films that are actually worth your time. Movies that tell complete, engaging stories, have stronger character development, and leave a lasting impression. When you compare progressive to the amount of quality anime content available, it becomes difficult to justify spending several hours watching something that still feels like a watered-down version of a better story. If you're already a huge Sword Art Online fan, then maybe you'll get some enjoyment out of seeing more of Aincrad. But if you're someone who is just looking for a great anime movie experience, I would honestly recommend looking somewhere else. There are plenty of better movies out there that deserve your time more than progressive does. And the most hilarious part of all of this is that after getting a taste of the old Sword Art Online hate train again, Mother's Basement apparently wants to come back for more. He was supposed to be done. He had already spent years criticizing the series, made his points, and moved on. The Sword Art Online hate era was supposed to be over. But then Unanswered Butterfly came along, reopened the old wounds, and suddenly that familiar feeling came rushing back. It's like he got one more taste of Sword Art Online criticism and realized, wait a minute, there is still so much more to talk about. Now he wants to go back and cover parts of the franchise that he never fully discussed, including things like War of Underworld Part 2. And honestly, that's the funniest possible outcome for Sword Art Online fans who claim the criticism was dead. The franchise didn't escape its critics. It just temporarily avoided their attention. But the moment Sword Art Online gave people another reason to look closer, the criticism came flooding back. Instead of burying the old discussions forever, the series accidentally revived them and created even more content for its biggest critics. Sword Art Online fans wanted everyone to move on, but apparently Sword Art Online itself had other plans. It couldn't just let the controversy stay buried. It had to come back, dig up the old arguments, and give people even more reasons to talk about why the series doesn't work. It never ends. The Sword Art Online hate train is truly the gift that keeps on giving. No matter how many times people think the conversation is finally over, the franchise somehow finds a way to bring everyone right back into it. You could spend years analyzing Sword Art Online's problems, cover every major controversy, and think you've finally reached the bottom of the barrel. Then a new movie, season, or character comes along and proves there is somehow still more material left. That's the funniest thing about Sword Art Online. It has been criticized for over a decade, yet people are still finding new things to complain about. The franchise is basically an endless source of content for its critics. Every time you think the well has run dry, Sword Art Online grabs a shovel and starts digging deeper. The hate doesn't disappear. It just goes dormant until the next questionable writing decision wakes it back up. And that's why Unanswered Butterfly is so funny. Instead of being the movie that finally proves everyone wrong and shows that Sword Art Online has moved past its old problems, it ended up doing the exact opposite. It reminded people why they were criticizing the series in the first place and created an entirely new wave of discussions. At this point, the Sword Art Online hate train doesn't even need fuel anymore. It runs on its own. There will always be another character, another story decision, or another moment that gives critics something new to talk about. Sword Art Online might be one of the only franchises where the criticism has become almost as long-running as the series itself. People love to say that hating Sword Art Online is a dead horse that the internet needs to stop beating, but honestly, that horse is very much still alive. It's not even close to dead. If anything, Sword Art Online has somehow turned into the undead horse that refuses to stay down. Every time someone says, "We've already talked about Sword Art Online enough," the franchise releases something new that gives people another reason to start the conversation all over again. The thing is, a dead topic doesn't keep generating new discussions, new videos, and new criticism years later. If people were truly done with criticizing Sword Art Online, nobody would still be making videos about it. Nobody would still be debating the writing, the characters, or the decisions the franchise continues to make. But here we are. A new movie comes out, and suddenly the old criticisms are back. A character like Emirun gets introduced, and people have an entirely new reason to complain. Critics who supposedly moved on are making videos again. The same franchise that fans claim nobody cares about anymore is still somehow creating hours of content. That's not a dead horse. That's a horse that keeps getting revived every time Sword Art Online gives people another reason to criticize it. At this point, hating Sword Art Online has become one of the longest-running traditions in anime communities. The franchise has been around for over a decade, and somehow the criticism is still finding new life. The horse isn't dead. It's just sitting there waiting for the next questionable writing decision to wake it back up. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what Mother's Basement has to say about War of Underworld Part 2. Before Unanswered Butterfly came along, that was arguably one of the lowest points in the entire Sword Art Online franchise. And that's saying something, because Sword Art Online already has a pretty long history of controversial moments. But War of Underworld Part 2 was one of those arcs where even a lot of people who defended the series started questioning what the writers were doing. There is so much material there for criticism. The questionable story decisions, the way certain characters are handled, the pacing problems, and the overall direction of the arc created a lot of frustration. It was supposed to be this massive conclusion to the Alicization storyline, but instead, it left many viewers feeling disappointed. The funniest part is that Mother's Basement originally never even got around to covering everything Sword Art Online had to offer. There were still entire sections of the franchise left untouched, and now that Unanswered Butterfly has brought him back into the Sword Art Online conversation, he has a whole backlog of material waiting for him. And honestly, I'm curious what he will have to say about War of Underworld Part 2, because if he thought Unanswered Butterfly was bad, this is another huge target. Before this new movie came out, War of Underworld Part 2 was one of the biggest examples people pointed to when talking about Sword Art Online's problems. It almost feels like Sword Art Online keeps creating new chapters in its own criticism history. Just when you think the franchise has already provided every possible reason to criticize it, it somehow finds another way to keep the conversation alive. I'm sure Mother's Basement will have a lot to say about this dumpster fire. If Unanswered Butterfly was enough to bring him back into the Sword Art Online conversation after years away, then War of Underworld Part 2 is basically another giant pile of material waiting to be analyzed. This is exactly the kind of arc that gives critics plenty to work with because the problems aren't just small details or minor complaints. There are a lot of major decisions that invite criticism. The funniest part is that Sword Art Online fans spent years saying the hate was over, that people had moved on, and that there was nothing left to criticize. But then you look at an arc like War of Underworld Part 2 and realize there are still entire sections of the franchise that haven't even been fully covered by some of its biggest critics. Mother's Basement has already shown that he can find plenty to talk about when it comes to Sword Art Online, and this arc is no exception. Between the writing choices, character moments, and story decisions, there is no shortage of things to dissect. At this point, Sword Art Online almost feels like an endless supply of content for critics. Every time someone thinks they've reached the end of the criticism, the franchise comes along with another questionable decision and says, "Wait, there's more." So if Mother's Basement decides to return once again and tear apart War of Underworld Part 2, I don't think anyone should be surprised. Sword Art Online has been providing material for criticism for over a decade, and this dumpster fire still has plenty of fuel left. And I guarantee it won't end here. The next time a new Sword Art Online movie, season, or project releases, I wouldn't be surprised if Mother's Basement jumps right back onto the hate train. At this point, Sword Art Online and criticism of Sword Art Online are practically connected at the hip. Every time the franchise goes quiet, people assume the conversation is finally over. They think the old debates are finished, the critics have moved on, and the series has escaped its reputation. Then a new release happens, and suddenly, the entire cycle starts all over again. A new character gets introduced, a new story decision gets made, and suddenly there is another wave of discussions, reviews, and criticism. Sword Art Online has proven time and time again that it has an incredible ability to create new reasons for people to talk about its flaws. Mother's Basement may take breaks, but I don't think Sword Art Online is ever truly safe from another roast video. The franchise has been providing content for critics for over a decade, and unless the writing suddenly takes a massive turnaround, there will probably always be something new to analyze. The funniest part is that Sword Art Online fans keep hoping the criticism will finally disappear, but the franchise itself keeps bringing it back. It is almost like Sword Art Online has a built-in system where every new release has a chance of creating the next big controversy. So no, the Sword Art Online hate train is not stopping anytime soon. It might slow down. It might disappear for a while. But the next time the franchise releases something questionable, you can probably expect Mother's Basement and plenty of other critics to be right there waiting. The train isn't dead. It just keeps waiting at the station for the next disaster to arrive. The hate will always be there, no matter how much some fans try to pretend it isn't. Sword Art Online has built up such a long history of criticism that it isn't something that can simply disappear overnight. You can't have years of controversies, countless discussions, and a reputation as one of the most divisive anime series of the last decade, and then suddenly act like none of that ever happened. Some fans want to believe that the criticism is just an outdated meme from the past, that everyone secretly changed their minds, and that the series has completely escaped its old reputation. But that's not how it works. People don't forget years of problems just because a fan base says they're supposed to. The criticism might become quieter over time, but that doesn't mean it is gone. It just means people aren't constantly repeating the same arguments every single day. The moment Sword Art Online releases something that reminds people why they dislike the franchise in the first place, all of those conversations come right back. Unanswered Butterfly is the perfect example. Fans could claim the hate was dead, but one controversial movie was enough to bring critics back, restart the debates, and remind everyone that the same frustrations are still there. The hate isn't something that fans can simply wish away. It has become part of Sword Art Online's identity at this point. The series can have millions of fans, sell merchandise, and continue releasing new content, but there will always be people who criticize it. And no amount of pretending otherwise will change that. The problem is that some fans just can't accept that something they love is hated by other people. For a lot of Sword Art Online fans, criticism of the series feels like a personal attack instead of just another person's opinion. They see people criticizing the writing, the characters, or the story decisions, and immediately try to dismiss it rather than acknowledge why those criticisms exist. But the reality is that you can enjoy something and still admit that other people have valid reasons for disliking it. A series having a dedicated fan base doesn't mean everyone has to agree that it's great. Different people are going to have different opinions, and that's just how entertainment works. Instead, some fans try to rewrite reality by claiming that the hate is gone, that everyone secretly likes Sword Art Online now, or that the criticism only exists because of old memes. But the reason Sword Art Online is still criticized is because many people genuinely have problems with the series. You can't just erase years of criticism because you personally enjoy something. The fact that people still make videos criticizing Sword Art Online doesn't mean the fans can't enjoy it. It just means the franchise has always been divisive. There are people who love it, and there are people who think it has major flaws. Both groups can exist at the same time, but pretending the criticism doesn't exist won't make it disappear. If anything, trying to deny it only makes it more obvious that the criticism is still there. And honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if a future Sword Art Online release ends up being even worse than Unanswered Butterfly. At this point, it feels like every time people think the franchise has reached its lowest point, Sword Art Online somehow find a way to dig even deeper. The series has already given critics years of material, but there always seems to be another questionable decision waiting around the corner. Unanswered Butterfly might be considered the current low point, but history has shown that Sword Art Online is more than capable of surprising people in the worst possible way. Just when fans and critics think they've seen everything, the franchise manages to introduce another frustrating character, another strange story choice, or another moment that makes people wonder what the writers were thinking. And that's what makes the future of Sword Art Online so interesting from a critic's perspective. There is always the possibility that the next movie or season could somehow create an entirely new level of disappointment. Will it happen? Maybe, maybe not. But after everything this franchise has already done, I wouldn't bet against it. Sword Art Online has spent years proving that the hate train never truly runs out of fuel. The next big release could be the thing that finally improves the franchise, but it could also be the next disaster that brings everyone right back for another round of criticism. Because if there's one thing Sword Art Online has consistently delivered, it's something for people to talk about. It's honestly baffling to me that Sword Art Online still has such a dedicated fan base after everything that has happened with this franchise. From my perspective, the series already started off with a lot of problems, and instead of fixing those issues over time, it feels like every new release finds a way to make things even worse. Rather than building on its potential, the franchise keeps making decisions that leave people questioning how it continues to go in the wrong direction. What makes it even more surprising is that Sword Art Online has had so many opportunities to improve. The series has had movies, multiple seasons, and years of experience behind it. At this point, you would expect the writing to become more polished and the storytelling to improve. Instead, it feels like the franchise keeps repeating the same mistakes while adding new ones on top. Every new release seems to create another reason for people to criticize it. Whether it's questionable character writing, frustrating plot decisions, or characters are difficult to tolerate, Sword Art Online continues to give its critics more material. And yet, somehow, the fans are still there defending it through every controversy and every disappointing release. I genuinely don't understand how people can watch a franchise go through so many ups and downs and still have the same level of enthusiasm. But I guess that's also part of what makes Sword Art Online such an interesting phenomenon. For every person who thinks the series gets worse with every new release, there's someone else who is still waiting for the next big adventure. Love it or hate it, Sword Art Online has managed to survive years of criticism and keep going. And at this point, That might be the most impressive thing about it. Sometimes it honestly feels like some Sword Art Online fans forget that other anime, movies, and stories exist. The way some people defend this franchise, you would think Sword Art Online is the only piece of media ever created. They act like criticizing Sword Art Online means you are attacking the entire concept of anime itself, when in reality, there are thousands of other series out there with stronger writing, better characters, and more interesting worlds. There are so many incredible anime out there that do virtual worlds, fantasy adventures, romance, action, and character development better than Sword Art Online. But some fans seem completely unwilling to look beyond this one franchise. They treat every criticism as if someone is trying to take away the one thing they enjoy. And that's the strange part. You can like Sword Art Online while also acknowledging that there are plenty of flaws. You can enjoy Kirito, Asuna, or the world building while still admitting that other series might handle similar ideas much better. But instead, some fans act like Sword Art Online has to be defended at all costs. Any negative opinion gets dismissed, every criticism is called old news, and every new release is treated like it is going to finally prove the haters wrong. Meanwhile, there's an entire world of other anime waiting to be discovered. There are stories with deeper characters, more creative concepts, and better written plots that deserve attention. Yet some fans are so focused on proving Sword Art Online is secretly a masterpiece that they ignore everything else available. At the end of the day, Sword Art Online is just one franchise among thousands. Enjoy it if you like it, but acting like it is the peak of storytelling and refusing to acknowledge its problems is where things get ridiculous. I could literally sit here for hours and give you a list of hundreds, maybe even thousands, of movies that are a better use of your time than Unanswered Butterfly. And that's what makes this movie so frustrating. It's not just that it's bad. It's that there are so many incredible movies out there competing for your attention. There are films with better stories, better characters, better animation, better emotional moments, and actual reasons to remember them after the credits roll. Why would anyone choose to spend their limited free time watching a movie that leaves them frustrated when there are countless other options available? You could watch a masterpiece. You could discover a hidden gem. You could experience a movie that actually respects your time and gives you something in return. Instead, you could spend those same couple of hours watching Unanswered Butterfly and wondering why you didn't pick literally anything else. That's the biggest problem with a movie like this. It isn't just bad in a vacuum. It exists in a world where there is an endless amount of amazing entertainment available. Every minute you spend watching something disappointing is a minute you could have spent watching something genuinely great. I could recommend classic anime movies, modern animated films, sci-fi movies, fantasy adventures, psychological thrillers, or even random movies you've probably never heard of, and almost all of them would give you a better experience than Unanswered Butterfly. The competition is just too strong. When there are thousands of movies out there that can make you laugh, cry, think, or get completely immersed in another world, choosing to spend your time on a movie that feels like a chore is almost impossible to justify. Unanswered Butterfly isn't just a bad Sword Art Online movie. It's a bad choice when there are so many better choices sitting right next to it. As for me, I'll continue hating on Sword Art Online. I never stopped. While some people like to pretend the criticism disappeared and everyone suddenly changed their mind about the franchise, I was never one of those people. The hate train didn't need to be restarted for me, because I never got off in the first place. I've been criticizing Sword Art Online for years, and Unanswered Butterfly just gave me another reason to talk about it. In fact, I already made my own review of the movie explaining exactly why I think it fails. And that's the thing about Sword Art Online. Every time the franchise releases something new, fans act like this will finally be the entry that proves the critics wrong. They always hope that the next season, movie, or arc will somehow erase all the problems people have had with the series for years. But then another release comes out and reminds everyone why those criticisms existed in the first place. Unanswered Butterfly didn't make me start disliking Sword Art Online. It just gave me more material. The same issues that have bothered me about the franchise are still there, and this movie added even more problems on top of them. So while Mother's Basement might have returned to the battlefield after years away, I never left. I've been here the entire time, watching Sword Art Online continue to make the same mistakes and finding new ways to disappoint. The hate train doesn't need to be revived when you've never stopped writing it. The funniest part is that I had only covered the first 18 minutes of Unanswered Butterfly, and my review was already over 6.5 hours long. Just think about that for a second. I wasn't even halfway through the movie. I had barely scratched the surface, and I had already spent an absurd amount of time breaking down everything I thought was wrong with it. The characters, the writing decisions, the pacing, the dialogue, the logic behind certain scenes, and all the little details that add up to make the experience. So frustrating. And that was only the first 18 minutes. Imagine how long this review is going to be once I actually get through the entire movie. At this rate, I might need to measure the runtime in days instead of hours. The crazy thing is that I wasn't even forcing myself to stretch it out. The movie genuinely gives me that much to talk about. Every few minutes there is another questionable choice, another moment that makes me stop and ask, who thought this was a good idea? Most movies would struggle to fill a long review because there simply isn't enough to discuss. Unanswered Butterfly has the opposite problem. There's almost too much material. It feels like the movie keeps handing me more things to criticize the longer I watch. So if you thought Mother's Basement returning to criticize Sword Art Online was impressive, just wait until you see how much content this movie has created for me. I started with 18 minutes of footage and somehow ended up with a 6.5 hour review. At this point, I'm genuinely curious how long the final version will be when I finally finish tearing apart the entire movie. I haven't stopped hating Sword Art Online, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Unlike people who only jump back into the conversation whenever a new controversy happens, I've been consistent this entire time. The criticism never went away from me because the problems I have with the franchise were never just about one movie, one arc, or one bad decision. They go much deeper than that. Sword Art Online has had years to improve, but every new release seems to find another way to remind me why I disliked the series in the first place. Instead of fixing the issues that have been criticized for years, the franchise keeps creating new examples of the same problems. And that's why Unanswered Butterfly didn't change my opinion. It didn't suddenly make me hate Sword Art Online. I was already there. All this movie did was give me even more reasons to talk about why I think the franchise fails. Some people might get tired of criticizing the same series over and over again, but with Sword Art Online, there always seems to be something new to discuss. Whether it's the writing, the characters, the story decisions, or the way certain ideas are handled, the franchise continues to provide endless material. So while some fans are waiting for the criticism to disappear, I'm not going anywhere. The Sword Art Online hate train has been running for years, and I'm still on board. As long as the franchise continues releasing content that gives me something to criticize, I'll be here talking about it. I haven't stopped hating Sword Art Online before, and I definitely won't be stopping anytime soon. I'm making these hate videos to give Sword Art Online fans a reality check. A lot of fans have convinced themselves that the criticism surrounding this franchise is completely gone, that everyone who dislikes Sword Art Online has moved on, and that the series has somehow escaped its reputation. But that's simply not the reality. The reason I keep making these videos is because I think it's important to have those conversations. Enjoying something is perfectly fine, but pretending that a series has no flaws and dismissing every criticism as old news doesn't change the actual problems people have with it. Sword Art Online has always been a divisive franchise. There are millions of people who enjoy it, but there are also plenty of viewers who have legitimate complaints about the writing, characters, and storytelling. Acting like those criticisms don't exist doesn't make them disappear. That's where these videos come in. I'm not making them because I think fans aren't allowed to enjoy Sword Art Online. People can like whatever they want. The point is to push back against the idea that the franchise is above criticism or that anyone who dislikes it is just blindly hating. Sometimes fans need to hear opinions they disagree with. Sometimes they need someone to point out the flaws that they might overlook because they are attached to the series. And that's what these videos are about. Looking at Sword Art Online critically and talking about the problems that many people ignore. If fans still love the series after hearing all of that, that's completely fine. But at the very least, they should be willing to acknowledge that the criticism exists and that there are real reasons why people continue to dislike the franchise. The hate isn't here just to be negative. It's here to remind people that no series is above criticism, and Sword Art Online is no exception. And sure, Sword Art Online fans probably don't like me very much, considering I'm constantly dunking on their favorite series. Every time a new release comes out, I'm right there pointing out the problems, criticizing the writing, and explaining why I think the franchise doesn't work. But honestly, I couldn't care less what they think. I'm not making these videos to win over the hardcore fans or get approval from people who already love Sword Art Online. If someone enjoys the series, that's fine. They are completely free to like whatever they want. But I'm also free to have my own opinion and explain why I disagree. The internet is full of people defending the things they love, but not everything deserves endless praise. Sometimes a popular series needs people willing to criticize it, point out its flaws, and have the conversations that fans would rather avoid. And let's be honest, if Sword Art Online fans are upset because someone is criticizing their favorite show, that's kind of expected. I'm literally making videos about why I think the series is bad. Of course, the people who love it aren't going to be my biggest supporters. But that isn't going to stop me. I'm not here to make Sword Art Online fans happy. I'm here to give my honest opinion, make entertaining videos, and talk about the problems I see with the franchise. If that means some fans dislike my channel, then so be it. At the end of the day, they can keep enjoying Sword Art Online, and I'll keep criticizing it. That's what makes discussions about media interesting. Not everyone has to agree. And as long as Sword Art Online keeps giving me things to talk about, I'll keep making these videos. And sure, I'm sure I'll get plenty of angry comment from Sword Art Online fans who don't appreciate me constantly dunking on their favorite series. I'm expecting it. When you spend an entire video criticizing something that people are passionate about, there are always going to be people who show up to defend it. Some people are going to disagree, some people are going to get offended, and some people are probably going to write entire essays explaining why I'm wrong. But honestly, I couldn't care less. The funniest part is that some people will spend hours typing out angry responses, try to convince me that Sword Art Online is actually a masterpiece, while I probably won't even see them. I don't sit around refreshing my comment section looking for arguments. I don't spend my day fighting with people online over an anime. So if you want to write a 500-word comment telling me why Sword Art Online is underrated, go ahead. Have fun typing into the void. The reality is that no amount of angry comments is going to change my opinion. I watched the movie, I formed my thoughts, and I made my review. People are free to disagree with me, but they aren't going to convince me that I secretly enjoyed something I didn't. At the end of the day, these videos are about sharing my perspective and having fun criticizing a franchise that has given me plenty of material over the years. If Sword Art Online fans want to defend the series, that's their choice. But if they think a comment section argument is going to make me suddenly stop criticizing Sword Art Online, they're going to be disappointed. The hate train keeps moving, and angry comments aren't going to be the thing that stops it. Sword Art Online fans are constantly disliking my videos as if somehow that is going to change anything. Every time I upload a video criticizing the franchise, there are always people who show up just to hit the dislike button, leave angry comments, and make it very clear that they're not happy someone is criticizing their favorite anime. But here's the thing. A dislike button isn't a magical make the criticism disappear button. You can dislike my video. You can disagree with everything I say. You can defend Sword Art Online until the end of time. But none of that changes the fact that I'm still going to make these videos. If anything, the reaction almost proves the point. Some fans are so determined to defend this series that they can't even tolerate someone having a negative opinion about it. Instead of accepting that different people can watch the same show and come away with completely different opinions, they act like criticism itself is some kind of personal attack. But I'm not making these videos because I expect everyone to agree with me. I'm making them because I enjoy analyzing media, sharing my thoughts, and talking about a franchise that has given me plenty of things to discuss. A few dislikes aren't going to suddenly make me wake up and say, you know what? Sword Art Online is actually perfect. I was wrong. That's not how opinions work. So go ahead and dislike the videos if you want. Click that button as many times as you like. At the end of the day, the video is still there the criticism is still there, and I'll still be making more. The hate comments, the dislikes, and the angry reactions aren't going to stop me. If anything, they just make it even more obvious that the Sword Art Online debate is still alive and well. And hey, if there really was no visible hate for Sword Art Online anymore like some fans claim, then they shouldn't even be seeing my videos in the first place. That's the funny contradiction. Some fans insist that the Sword Art Online hate train is dead, that nobody cares about criticizing the series anymore, and that the old reputation is completely gone. But somehow, every time someone uploads a video criticizing Sword Art Online, those same fans magically appear within minutes to dislike it and leave angry comments. How does that happen if the hate supposedly doesn't exist anymore? If people truly didn't care about Sword Art Online criticism, they would simply ignore it. They would scroll past the video, watch something else, and move on with their day. But that's not what happens. Instead, they actively search out these videos, click on them, and take the time to tell everyone how much they disagree. And honestly, that's proof that the conversation is still alive. The fact that people are still getting defensive about criticism shows that Sword Art Online is still a divisive franchise. The criticism didn't disappear. It didn't vanish. It didn't get erased just because some fans wish it would. The hate is still there, and the reactions from the fan base are part of the reason why. Because if nobody cared anymore, there would be no angry comments. There would be no dislikes. There would be no fans showing up to defend the series every time someone says something negative about it. The funniest thing is that every time fans try to prove the hate is gone, their own reactions prove the exact opposite. The Sword Art Online hate train is still running. And judging by how quickly people show up whenever someone criticizes the series, it doesn't look like it's running out of fuel anytime soon. So go ahead, Sword Art Online fans. Leave your comments. Hit the dislike button. Tell me how wrong I am and how amazing you think the series is. Because honestly, you're only proving the point. The funniest part about this entire situation is the contradiction. Some fans claim that the Sword Art Online hate is gone, that nobody cares anymore, and that the criticism is just an outdated joke from years ago. But then the moment someone makes a video criticizing the franchise, those same fans show up immediately to defend it. If the hate is truly dead, why are you here? If nobody cares about criticizing Sword Art Online anymore, why are you spending your time watching videos you disagree with, leaving angry comments, and hitting the dislike button? The reaction itself proves that the conversation is still alive. The criticism still exists, and the fact that people feel the need to fight against it shows that the series is still just as divisive as ever. And that's completely fine. If you love Sword Art Online, enjoy it. Nobody is stopping you. But pretending that everyone suddenly changed their minds and that all criticism disappeared is where the argument falls apart. So go ahead, comment, dislike the video, defend Kirito, Asuna, and the entire franchise if you want. At the end of the day, you're not making the criticism disappear. You're not proving that the hate is gone. If anything, you're showing that the debate is still very much alive. The hate train keeps moving, and every angry comment is just another reminder that it never really stopped. All you're doing is proving that the hate is working. It hits you exactly where it hurts. That's the funniest part about the reaction. The entire purpose of these videos is to criticize Sword Art Online and point out the problems I see with the franchise. So when fans show up angry, upset, and desperate to defend it, they're basically proving that the criticism is getting a reaction. The goal was never to make everyone agree. The goal was to start a conversation, share an opinion, and give people something to think about. If a video criticizing Sword Art Online gets fans talking, debating, and rushing to defend the series, then clearly the topic still matters. And that's what some fans don't seem to understand. Disagreeing with criticism doesn't make the criticism disappear. Getting angry at a video doesn't magically erase. The point's being made. If anything, the reaction shows that Sword Art Online is still a franchise people have strong feelings about, both positive and negative. The funniest thing is that some fans seem determined to prove that nobody hates Sword Art Online anymore, but then they immediately show up to argue against anyone who criticizes it. The attempt to prove the hate is gone ends up highlighting the exact opposite. The criticism is still reaching people. The discussion is still happening. The franchise is still getting reactions. So keep commenting, keep disliking, keep defending Sword Art Online, because every angry response is just another reminder that the conversation is far from over. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, because this is only the beginning. There's plenty more Sword Art Online criticism coming your way. This franchise has given me no shortage of things to talk about, and as long as it keeps releasing new content, there will always be something new to analyze, criticize, and tear apart. Whether it's a new movie, a new season, or another questionable writing decision, you can bet I'll be there to cover it. So if you enjoy watching Sword Art Online get put under the microscope, make sure you stick around. There's still plenty of problems to discuss, plenty of ridiculous moments to break down, and plenty of reasons why this franchise continues to be one of the most controversial anime series out there. The hate train isn't stopping anytime soon. Subscribe if you want to join the ride, because this is far from the last time we're going to be talking about Sword Art Online.